We're happy to have everybody. We have these different questions. I think everyone would know in here, Mary, we're having a study on speech season with salt. And what we're doing is just discussing common questions that come up from our loved ones when they ask us, or just in conversation, statements that are made, and can kind of at the time put us on the spot. And we're just trying to figure out what's the best way to answer them is one thing, and secondly, in a wise way, so that maybe we don't put a divide where there might potentially be some disagreement on what it is that we have to discuss. And, that's okay, but we don't want to be ugly about it. We don't want to come across that way. And hopefully we can all come together to a consensus on what God tells us as an answer to these questions. So the one that we've been discussing, we started last week. I figured this one would take at least 2 weeks, and that should be all, okay? But I figured it would take 2 weeks to get through. And it's, what do we do if a loved one comes to us and says, look, Derek, here's the situation. I have hopefully that'd be nice, with some rapport, maybe some respect for you and what you would say about this, some things about the Bible, and I'm just not happy in my relationship. And I feel like the only way that I'm going to be happy is if we split up in this marriage that we have and go our separate ways. What do you think? Could you give me any advice on this? And so that's where we left off last week in discussing, and I feel like the most important thing is to lay out, look, from the very get-go, here's what God has envisioned in a marriage. Here's what God has envisioned in a family. And I didn't mention this, and I want to bring this in this week. And I think the best way I know to, and I'm sure you've seen this before, to show a diagram that gives biblical teaching on this matter, is we often make a mistake in thinking that a marriage is between two people that we're trying to work out, okay? Obviously, yeah, there are two people that are involved, but it's greater than two that are involved in this marriage. I had a great conversation with Marty afterward, and we were sorting through it. I'm like him, is like, okay, officially what's constituted as a marriage, when, why, how, all those kinds of things. And so we were hashing this out from the scriptures, and I think we came to this sensible conclusion between the two of us of what seems to happen. In the Bible, we're told in Matthew chapter 19, and in fact, if you'd want to go there, we're going to be there in just a moment. But in Matthew chapter 19, God says, a man, and this goes back to Genesis 2. This is nothing new. That's Jesus' response to the question about divorce. He says, well, let's just go back to the beginning, see what God's vision is for marriage, if you want to talk about divorce. And so he goes back there and he says, a man and a woman, so you have one man and one woman, and they leave, each of them respectively, their mothers and their fathers behind. And so you have a leaving of one family, a leaving of another family, and coming together to form a separate or a new family. Now we're going to find in Malachi 2, this is referred to as a covenant. A covenant is an agreement between two parties. So there are two people who have a consensual agreement to leave families behind, to come together to form a new family, and we're told that the two entities combine to make one flesh. And that's a reference to the act of intimacy that takes place within marriage. And so you have an agreement, two parties leave families behind, form a new family, and these are two that are intimate with one another, and they consummate, you sometimes hear, that marriage. And we're told this, therefore what God has joined together. It is not simply a piece of paper with a couple of human signatures, or 3 or 4 or 5 human signatures. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we can violate the laws of the land and God be okay with that and recognize things as marriage. My point is this, it's more than a piece of paper that joins two people together in marriage. It's the two people and their agreements, and it's God bringing them together. Now we're also going to find in 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, this is not necessarily two godly people in our time. It's not two Christians. Back when, it might not just be two Jews. It's any two people who are eligible by God's standards to come together in marriage. And they're in agreement to leave their families behind, to come together and to form a new family, to be intimate with one another, and only with one another, God says, I've joined them together, regardless of what their religious backgrounds are. They may be irreligious, they may be atheists. God has still joined them together. He agrees with this union as his idea. Scott? Oh, hold on just one second. Sorry. Thank you, Parker. Go ahead, Scott.
No, Nowadays, you need to watch how you say that. When you say two people nowadays, that could be two guys, two women.
Right.
So you need to.
You're right. And that's why I said one man and one woman, right? You're exactly right. No, I'm with you. That goes back to the one we covered before. How do we respond to, right? Very good, Scott. No, you're right. Because if it's only a marriage and a piece of paper, then God would be joining that together also. But we know that it doesn't fit his criteria of two eligible people of opposite genders. Good. Probably nice to specify. All right, so I love this diagram. Again, I'm sure it's not new to you, but it's so fresh. I feel like every time you see it and so accurate, the biblical concept that love, if you want to look at it mathematically and a marriage, is not a line segment. A line segment's made up of 2 points, okay? It is a triangle. As far as endpoints go, we're going to have 3 meetup spots in that mathematically. And down at the bottom, the base of that triangle, you have a husband and a wife, and then you have the one who has brought them together and is in agreement with them. He's a part of this contract we're going to find in Malachi chapter 2. And so as a part of this contract, you have 3 parties that are in agreement with one another. Of course, the mission of, and by the way, it's mentioned become. That's a process. Not will instantly be, it's become. It takes work, and it takes time for this to happen. Ideally, in a marriage, a husband and wife who start out as 2 completely separate entities get so close to one another, the one feels like he or she doesn't have life or can't live without the other. And obviously one can, but when you have 2 people that are so close, and you'll see that when they've been married for 50 years, right around that, and one of them passes away, the one will say, I feel like a part of me has died, and he or she's not the same person. Well, that's actually, one sense that's sad, I realize, but another, it's a beautiful picture of what God designed marriage to be. But if you'll notice, as the husband and the wife, they're wanting to grow closer and closer together. There's only one way of doing that, growing closer to God. And when you have 2 people who are growing closer to God, you don't have to worry about whether they're growing closer to each other. And you see that among the Lord's people more than you do anywhere else. The closest and the strongest marriages. I like to say when young people come to me or been married a short time and we're having issues and this kind of, and they're both Christians, and it's like not something you foresee. And one of the first things that I tell them, okay, let's back up, time out here. It's completely normal what you're experiencing is one thing. And I tell them, and I don't give any examples, okay, but I tell them, you pick any couple in the church, anyone that you think, man, their marriage is just, and their family is, and I can guarantee you that they've gone through the same type of thing that you're going through right now. I've heard church leaders a number of times say, listen, even as 2 Christians, it's not easy. There were times that we were at each other's throats and we wondered if this is going to work, and 2 people are just as close as you're going to find. It's normal, okay? It's called human interaction and relationship to go through tough times. It's not that there's a complete absence of problems or challenges in marriage or in family. It's that you have 2 people who are trying to make things work, trying to be closer to God. 2 people who are forgiving toward one another when there is disagreement, when troubles do arise. And when you have that, you have a beautiful picture of what God designed marriage to be and the family to be. Not because it's flawless in every way, but because people are becoming closer to God. As we come closer to God, we naturally come closer to one another. All right, so here's what we laid out last week. Here's what God designed marriage and the family to be. 1 man, 1 woman for life. And who have determined we're going to work things out no matter what it takes. We're going to be there for each other. We're going to be forgiving of one another. And we're going to make a go of this thing. And we're going to have a happy life together. A husband loves his wife, willing to sacrifice whatever it takes for her physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually. That's Ephesians 5. And then you also have in Ephesians 5, make sure that the wife respects her husband and submits herself to his godly lead. Ladies, if you have a guy who sacrifices for you, is uber concerned with your physicality, with your finances, with your emotions, with your spirituality, is it hard to respect that kind of person? if he is simply headed toward heaven and you follow that lead, what's going to happen with you? Is that a bad idea? Kids who are concerned about growing closer to God obey their parents and they respect their parents. They give them honor. I don't believe we actually read this one last week. I intended to, but Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, parents who provide the instruction that kids need, not only for spirituality, but as well secularly, get them prepared for the real world and for life, and also give them the discipline, the parameters that their lives need. Whether kids realize it or not, they're asking for discipline. They need it. That's why they test us out. Mom and Dad going to let me get away with this? And they need some boundaries. They're looking for that, and psychologically, and they don't even realize that. And we provide those boundaries. Now, that doesn't mean that we abuse our kids and the discipline that we give them. And we have to be really careful, and that's what Ephesians 6:4 is all about. You fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and the admonition of the Lord. The Colossians parallel passage in chapter 3 is don't be so hard on them that they become disheartened or develop animosity towards you and feel like they're never going to live up to your standards. They're never going to make you happy. Psychologically, that's another thing that kids need. Not just love from their parents, but especially from their fathers, to be able to find approval from them. And that's what you have in a godly family. You have wives who respect and follow the lead of their godly husband. You have godly husbands who are willing to sacrifice anything and everything that his wife needs. You have kids who respect and obey their parents. You have parents who give them the instruction they need for life and for life hereafter, and discipline. Okay, now, again, taking a step back. That doesn't say that husbands are ever going to fall short in considering emotional needs of wife, okay? Husbands are going to make mistakes there. Doesn't mean that wives every single day is, okay, well, that's what my husband would like for us and our family to do, so that's what we're going to do. You know, there are going to be days, there's going to be some butting of heads probably there. Doesn't mean that kids aren't ever going to test those boundaries, even though they're trying to serve God also. Doesn't mean they're always going to listen to instruction. Doesn't mean that parents are always going to do discipline just the perfect way. There are going to be some mistakes along the way, but there are people, the point is this, that are growing closer to God all the time. And as those mistakes are made, you have husbands that are man enough to admit them. You have wives who are Christian enough to say, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have said that. You have kids who are willing to admit their mistakes. You have parents who are willing to admit to their kids, look, maybe we should have been a little stricter in this discipline. Or, maybe we're a little hard on you in this instance. And we're open and we have those conversations, and that's a godly family. Now I'd like to ask you, and I would encourage asking the person who's put this before us, what kind of life does that sound like for you? Is that the kind of marriage that you'd like to have? Is that the kind of family that you would like to enjoy from day to day? I think anybody would say, yeah, that sounds really good. The inclination is going to be this. But my kids aren't. But my wife's not. But the issue is my husband. Okay, time out. Let's back up here. Are you being the kind of child toward your parents that God tells us to be? Are you being the kind of parent toward your kids that God says? Are you being the kind of wife God tells you to be? Are you being the kind of husband that God tells you? We start right there. Am I doing as I should be doing in the marriage and in the family? Because we tend to want to look at what everyone else is doing instead of looking at what God has told us to do. And that's where it all begins. And Scott, to answer your question, thank you for patiently waiting from last week. We're probably not going to turn to and read it. But look at 1 Peter 3 and the first 7 verses. 1 Peter 3 and the first 7 verses. The first couple, we have wives. Don't forget, this is your role as a Christian. Be submissive, respectful. That's your role that God's laid out for you toward your husband. And he goes on to say that even if some do not obey the word, in other words, they're not subscribing to God's role for them in this marriage, their role in life, and they're not growing closer to God as they should. It's still your duty, wife, to perform your obligation toward your husband. And he goes on to explain an added benefit. First of all, that's your relationship with God, is what he's saying. But secondly, he says that they, those ungodly husbands that are unsubmissive toward the Lord, even without a word, may be won by the conduct of their wives. That's enough of an influence for them to change their conduct, and they develop a relationship with God. What do you think is going to happen in that marriage as that husband was down here? You know, the wife has moved closer to God all the time, and the husband's been down here. And now that husband starts ascending and getting closer to God. What's going to happen in that marriage? The two people are going to get closer to one another. And of course, the reverse could be the case. What are males supposed to do? Here I am trying to serve the Lord, getting closer to Him, and my wife couldn't care less. She's the problem. Okay, let's back up here. Husband, are you loving your wife? Are you sacrificing for her physically, economically? Are you taking care of her emotional needs as best as she'll allow? Or are you trying to help address within that relationship and possibly the family too, the spiritual needs that are there? Who knows? First of all, you need to grow closer to God. God expects that out of you. But who knows? But what, through your example, that won't change your wife. And then if she gets a relationship with God and she starts to move closer, guess what happens then in the marriage? Godliness is the fix to all of life's problems. It's not just a preparation for the life hereafter, it's a fix for all the issues that we encounter right here in the life that is. So that's the layout of God's vision for marriage. Now, what I want to do, and I would encourage to do then after we've established that with someone who would have this discussion with us, is, okay, let's just look at humanity's vision for marriage and the family and compare the two side by side, see which one looks better. If you're not already there, go to Matthew 19. Matthew 19. It was in verses 3 through 6 that we read the last time that we were together on a Sunday. We had read this question that's asked, the very thing really that's being put out here. Is it lawful for a man by the Pharisees to Jesus? 2,000 years, rewind, nothing's really any different than today. Same questions for life. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? So Jesus says, hang on, let's not get into divorce. Let's go back into marriage. Let's look at God's perfect vision, and let's get that in place. And he quits. He's really done, I think, with the teaching here. Let's just do it God's way. One man, one woman for life, and he doesn't want people to divorce. That's God's desire, if that's what you're asking. Well, they're not done. They still want to talk about divorce. Verse 7, they said to him, why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and to put her away? What they're asking is, why did God tell us He wants us to divorce our wives then? That doesn't make sense what you're saying. He responds to them this way in verse 8. It's a gross exaggeration and misapplication of the Scriptures to state what you are. God never said that in the law of Moses. I want you to write a piece of paper and get rid of your wives. God never told the people to do that. Verse 8, He said to them, Moses, because of and by the way, remember where Jesus goes to teach about marriage? It's not Moses. It's 2,500 years before that. He goes back to the beginning. He says, this wasn't in place from creation. But 2,500 years into the human experiment, this concept was introduced called divorce. God, through Moses, He allowed you or permitted you because of the hardness of your hearts to divorce your wives. This is not a compliment to humanity. He says essentially this, because the human spirit has such difficulty in getting over things, I would suggest this, has such trouble with forgiving. God, understanding that this may be the most difficult thing to forgive, what we're about to discuss right here in the allowance that Moses gives. Chapter 24 of Deuteronomy, it's because of some uncleanness that's found in her is the provision that's made there. There's some debate as to what this uncleanness is. To me, I think it's very clear. I believe it to be the very thing that Jesus is going to tell us in verse 9. I see it to be a bodily uncleanness in the sense of an unholy activity within the marriage. Okay, so Moses allowed you to do that, but notice what he goes on to say. But from the beginning, rewind 2,500 years, it was not so. You don't find this before God's provision about this. It began with the second law that he has with humanity, again, 2.5 millennia into human existence. From the beginning. So he's saying if you want to know God's feelings on this, doesn't want divorce. Period. Understood, okay, we're going to talk about something else a little bit later. Understood you have two eligible parties that he has brought together in marriage. He does not want divorce, period. That's his desire. Now, for 1,500 years, under the law of Moses, he allowed it for what appears to be a sexual, promiscuous lifestyle, involving an intimacy outside of that marriage. Go back to Deuteronomy 24. Okay, so what does he have to tell us? Now, in this time, does God ever allow it, even though it's not really what he wants? Verse 9. I was going to read it, but I want someone else to. That's our memory verse. Oh, yeah, let's have Fawn. Oh, no, okay. She wants you to do it, Roy. Okay, he wants you to do it. So what do we do? Okay, excellent. Good. So, Jesus says, and I speak to you, I don't believe anything's changed. You go back again to Deuteronomy 24 in the first few verses there, he's saying that this idea of God, he's going to pass this along under this new system. I will allow, I don't want divorce, to be very clear. I will allow divorce to take place and a subsequent remarriage, and recognize that as two eligible people for marriage that have been brought together by me, if what has precipitated this, the divorce and the remarriage, sexual immorality. That's where we need to redefine. What are we talking about here? All right, so this got brought up last week, the Greek word porneia. And as I stated then, I'll tell you again right now, I don't think there's any perfect single word, or maybe even single two words, that you can use to translate this to convey everything that's being spoken here. So, porneia, there's an argument for fornication is the best way to translate that. And then there's an argument on the other side, as we see in a lot of our newer versions, sexual immorality being the better of the two. I can make a case for either one. Here's why. You look up fornication in a dictionary, and typically what are you going to find as the first and probably even second definitions of that term, maybe even all of them? It's basically only what? Fornication in an English dictionary. Okay, it is a sexual relationship, and you'll find between a man and a woman, or an unmarried man and woman. That's encapsulated in this word, but that is far too narrow. Excuse me. Because there are many other things that fall under this umbrella term. Excuse me. It is unlawful sexual intercourse is the meaning of porneia. Unlawful. So it's any kind of sexual intercourse. It's physical. And that involves two people, usually, but doesn't always have to be two people. If you look up the meaning of this term, it includes, between unmarried persons, a man and a woman. It includes if one's married, one's not, or if both are married, or we would say adultery. It includes lesbianism. It includes homosexuality. It includes necrophilia. It includes pedophilia. And this is one that hopefully we would never encounter either, but it includes bestiality, which is what? With an animal. Absolutely. But the point is this, it's any kind of physical intercourse in a way of which God does not approve. That's what it is. And so I can make a case for sexual immorality being a better translation. But John, what did we point out last week even about that translation? You remember, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Okay. Well, he doesn't remember his wisdom because I'm pretty sure he's the one who brought it out. Sorry, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. But I believe it was he, it may have been someone else who had mentioned that there are a lot of things that are sexually immoral that aren't necessarily intercourse themselves. Okay, a person in the workplace could make suggestive comments to somebody. Well, that's sexually immoral. A person could look at images and or video that are inappropriate. That's sexually immoral, but that's not intercourse. It's not, and don't get me wrong, it's not to say that these things are okay. Those are wrong too, but it doesn't fit into this umbrella term, as far as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm off here, of what God would allow for the severing of a marriage and then the putting together of another one and He being approval of that. So the point of which is this: God says if you have two people who divorce for any other reason than unlawful sexual intercourse and enter into another arrangement, He says he or she commits adultery. Okay, now what's adultery again? It's not simply between a man and a woman. What's adultery? Okay, it's sexual intercourse with at least one of the two, and maybe both parties being married, but in that relationship not to one another. Now think about this for a minute. So God says if two married people, one of them engages in unlawful sexual intercourse, which of course is going to be outside of that marriage, He says, if that happens, we have an issue on our hands because if another relationship is then entered and in a marriage there's adultery going on. Adultery can only happen if at least one of the two parties is married. What He's saying is this: there's a slip of paper that human beings have made that say the two of them aren't married anymore. Who was it that joined the two together in the first place? It wasn't people through a piece of paper. And again, I'm not saying we can violate human, but it's God who brought them together. And if people say, well, here, I'm going to undo what God did, God is essentially saying, I don't recognize what people have done in defying my authority. He still sees them as joined together. Otherwise, it's impossible that adultery could take place. Does that make sense? To answer, I think it may have been a question someone brought out. 1 Corinthians 11, I don't want to turn to, you're welcome to if you want, but for time's sake, I'm not going to. 1 Corinthians 11, looking at 1 Corinthians 7, I want to say look in verses about 11 and 12, and it mentions that by the time that this letter is received, and that's the impact of the aorist verb tense there, but if by the time this letter is received, he's saying a husband and a wife that are married, they shouldn't depart from one another. They shouldn't divorce. We've covered that already. He says, more or less, but by the time you get this letter, if that's already happened, there are two options that are on the table. He says, either let him remain unmarried, not married, they've already divorced, or be reconciled to the person's husband. They are married, they're still together. You ever thought about that? If it's being considered on the same platitude, that's a contradiction of terms. We're told that they're unmarried, and yet they're still married because they have a spouse. Obviously, it can't be in the same way, or it doesn't make any sense. What we're told is this: there's a sense in which they're married, and there's a sense in which they're not married. Now, we know by the text itself what's the sense in which they're unmarried. Okay, separated physically, and undoubtedly there's a piece of paper that says that. So how are they still married? How are they still husband and wife? There we go. Does that make sense? That it's laid out implicitly in the Scriptures that you can be married to a person and unmarried to that person at the same time, but it can't be in the same way, or else it wouldn't make any sense. The piece of paper by human law says you're unmarried, and there's no need for a piece of paper because two people made a promise to God, and that's good for Him. And God has joined them together, and in that sense, they're still married. Okay, so I'm going to pause right there. Thank you for patiently waiting. Andrea, go ahead.
Well, I just had a question about
Sure.
Matthew 5, verse 28.
Okay.
It says, anyone who looks at a woman commits adultery
Right.
in his heart. So is that
Yeah.
a bad translation if we're
No.
going
No, it's
if we're
100%.
going to limit it to just a physical act?
Right. Okay, good question. So let's, matter of fact, I believe, is it right now? Verse 9 we've already covered. I believe we're going there right now. So, Andrea, you are a wizard. Look at that. Matthew chapter 5. Good job. All right, so this works out very well. Thank you. Perfect time to bring this up. Matthew 5. I'm sorry, I probably cut you off some. But what Andrea was asking is this. So in Matthew 5, verse 28, it's mentioned, of course, Jesus says, you've heard, and he's going through all this on the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard that you shall not commit adultery, right, as one of these. But I say to you in verse 28, whoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Right, absolutely. Already guilty of sin. Okay, so the question is this. Does that mean that the one now has a right to divorce the other and to move on and remarriage? Because Jesus says a sexual sin here has been committed, a very serious one. So, here's what we're going to do. In Matthew chapter 5, you have a lot of sins that are considered, physical sins that could be committed. And then Jesus ups the ante, saying, listen, it's not any more correct to commit this sin within you. And just to be clear, it's not temptation, okay? But it's entertaining the temptation, okay? It's a premeditation, you might say. It's a dwelling on it. Absolutely, 100% wrong. There's no question about that, okay? So as we back up just a little bit here, though, I want to point something out. Verse 21, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be in danger of the judgment. We get that. Unfortunately, we see it in our world all the time. So you go through the physical act of unlawfully taking another human being's life. If the judicial system is doing its job, what happens to you? All right, you're going to be punished in some way and very severely. Now, if you're going to... Very good. Absolutely. Right. No. You are a murderer. Very good. I'm with you 100%. And Jesus, I think, is going to address this right here in verse 22. So you murder. Now, if you're doing things God's way, your life will be taken. Unfortunately, we don't always do things God's way, and I think that's probably why we have so much more murder that takes place. But if it's dealt with swiftly, now fairly and judiciously in the right timing, but if it's dealt with swiftly and appropriately by God's standards, you shed innocent blood, your blood deserves to be shed. That's the patriarchal law. That's the law of Moses. That's the law of Christ. Romans 13, in case you're wondering, the law of Christ. Regardless, let's say it's life in prison, okay, that our judicial system gets. Well, we understand that. You should, because you've gone through the act of murder. Verse 22, but I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Reka, or you fool, you empty-headed person, you're stupid. Notice the prepositional phrase, without a cause. There are a number of times Paul uses this vernacular, in Galatians 3, Jesus does himself. In Matthew 23, it's not the use of this word fool of itself, but it's the prepositional phrase without a cause. There's no reason for it. And so if you're angry with your brother without a cause, if you speak against your brother without a cause, if you call him names without a cause, you're in danger of the council. You're in danger of hellfire. All right, so let's back up. I want to ask this. If I hate my brother, let's just go as menial as that. Menial, okay? If I hate my brother, I'm going to receive punishment for that if I don't fix that issue in this life, correct? Okay, if I exercise that hate toward my brother, I'm going to answer for that in this life and in the next life. If someone hates another person, is that ground physically and by the judicial system for him or her to be executed or to spend life in prison? Well, I don't know of any of us that would say, well, there should be physical consequences for that. I don't know of any, right? Even though there are spiritual consequences for that, correct? But what if a person exercises that hate that's found in his or her heart and unlawfully takes the life of another? There's spiritual consequences there. Should there be physical consequences there? Why? What's the difference? Because a physical act has been committed. Okay. Now, go down and look at verse 27. That's the context of this teaching. You've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery, the physical act. If you commit adultery, there's a spiritual issue. If you commit adultery, are there physical consequences to that? Absolutely. Then verse 28, but, this is different here, upping the ante, I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Okay? Spiritual, we have a problem on our hands. Should there be physical consequences when there's no physicality that's occurred? Right. Let me ask you. Right. It's not. Sure. Okay. Let's go another example right here. Let's say that someone steals a car, commits grand theft auto. Spiritual issue. Physical act committed. Physically, judicial system. What should happen? Okay, right? What if someone really wants to and is entertaining the thought of stealing someone's car? Spiritual issue? Absolutely. Physical consequences? Judicial getting involved? We can't do that, right? That's true, but all we're dealing with here is the entertaining of within. Okay, all right, because that's what it is, in the heart, just within a person, right? I'm sorry, should have waited. My point is this, I believe there's consistency in the argument and the teachings that are given, that if something's entertained in the heart that's sin, it's just as wrong before God than if you go ahead and go through with the action itself. Just to be clear, there is no question about that. But as we know in the case of murder, if someone's just really dwelling on the hate that is within him or her, spiritually, there's the same issue there as if you go through the act. But there aren't the same physical consequences from it because the physicality hasn't been enacted. Okay, all right. So thievery, the same thing. I can deeply want to steal somebody's things and think about it within myself a whole lot, yet never go through with the action. Spiritually, there's still something off between me and God. But the legal system, the physical consequences aren't involved. They're not connected because I didn't go through the act itself. Even though spiritually, my relationship with God's in disrepair. The point of which is this, if we use that line of reasoning, if a person were to entertain in his or her heart adulterous thoughts, that's wrong. Spiritually, something is in disrepair. But the question is this, should there be physical consequences when there's no physicality that has taken place? Well, okay, and I get it, but my point is this. Okay, right. Yes and no. Okay, so what you pointed out, he says you're a murderer if you hate your brother. We agree, right? Something's in disrepair in that relationship. Absolutely, absolutely. There you go. Exactly right. So, should a person physically pay the penalty of being a murderer in the judicial system then because of hatred? And you don't have to answer. I'm just saying that's the line of reasoning that's being drawn, is that it is what God teaches, that there are spiritual consequences even if it's just emotional. I don't believe she does. I don't believe she does. I haven't seen it, and here's why. The meaning of fornication is unlawful sexual intercourse, and I don't believe intercourse between two parties has taken place. No. Now, if a person wants to do that and think he or she has grounds, that's between the individual and God. I haven't seen any biblical justification, and to me, I don't feel like it follows the consistent thought process of what's taught between physical and spiritual sins. So, in short, that'd be my answer. Yeah, hold on. Okay, since we're over here, if you don't care to, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You hear me? You've done an excellent job of trying to explain this through the context of the actual scriptures, and I think you've done a great job with that. But in addition to that, I think we ought to look at God's wisdom that's suggested here. For example, if it were simply as easy as me reading someone else's mind, my spouse's mind, to know what's in their heart, and if I could really do that, then that sure would make it convenient for me to divorce a spouse. And so God puts limits on what is, he doesn't want divorce, period, but he puts restrictions on what divorce is allowed for, and that is sexual intercourse between someone other than unlawfully. And the fact that that God, no doubt, in my mind anyway, in His own wisdom, clarified that as such, so that that you don't say, well, I didn't like the way my spouse looked at that commercial on TV, or I didn't like the fact that there was something in a book that she read, or whatever it might be, wherein we're trying to read someone else's mind, which we are not able to do. And so I think that's probably God's great wisdom in being specific on what that exception is. But you did a great job in the context of that, explaining that very thing.
Appreciate the comments. And typically something that's physical is provable. That which is mental becomes much more challenging. Thanks for the comment. Thanks for waiting patiently, Marty. Sorry to put off yours so long.
Well, it was pretty much the exact same thought, just said better by John. But if it's in my mind, or if it's what I'm thinking of, whether it's sexual or thievery or stabbing a brother in the back, nobody knows that but me and God unless I speak it. I do something to put action out to prove that it's there.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go Jimmy, and if that's okay, we'll go Mary, and then we'll go Joe. Go ahead.
I think one of the problems with thinking that it's not physical when there's pornography involved is that it changes somebody's head, and he no longer looks at his wife in the same way.
Right.
And so his actions are now physical. You know, it's not, he's changed, and his whole mentality changes, and so that's more physical too.
Yeah, it can affect the physical, absolutely. Yep. Okay, let's go Joe.
Well, you've mentioned several times about man's law in regards to murder or hatred.
Right.
But I think we can get even better insight into God's mind if we look at God's law in the Old Testament, right? We understand we're under a new covenant, but we also understand we have the old
Right.
For our learning. And he had very serious consequences for the physical act of murder.
Right.
But we don't see the same for the hatred. Now, he does speak of hatred, and you've done, again, an excellent job of covering that. But let's look at just God and what he has for punishment for the two, separate, either the physical act of murder or just that deep down, hatred for another. And we don't see even in his law the same. So I think that we can interpret this, what you're saying as far as this other spiritual or physical or mental or physical difference between a man and a woman and so on. So I understand, the wordage there, and I think a lot of us have heard this discussion numerous times, but we just don't have the same from God, the same mindset that he tells us for the punishment. Now we're talking physical punishment. Obviously, as you've mentioned, spiritually, we're in the same danger as we would be if any of us had done,
Right.
a physical act. So I think that's important to look at God's law.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, any other comments? Or go ahead, Brad.
Obviously, you're trying to discuss it, where does someone have grounds and where they don't, right? I think that what's missed in some of this too is the power of forgiveness.
Right.
And we try to find ways and excuses to get out, if you will, or to find a way out. And while I've never dealt with something like that of wanting out of my marriage, the power of forgiveness is taught in the Old Testament and New Testament, and I think that gets missed when something like this happens, or when someone is in a situation in which that they have found grounds, so to speak, to leave their spouse. Forgiveness is a powerful thing,
Right.
and I don't want that to be missed through any of this.
Yeah, absolutely not. I appreciate it, and really that's the whole point of Jesus going back to the beginning. I believe what he clearly lays out is even when cheating is going on, whether it's mentally, spiritually, physically, he still wants it to work out. Still wants people to be together. I mean, that's his desire, but he does allow an exception. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So I'm sorry for stirring up so much.
No,
but
don't be sorry.
that is exactly the point that I was trying to make. Sorry, guys, for making you all puppets, but that is exactly the reason why I brought up those arguments, because I think that that's exactly what Moses was trying to get across.
Gotcha.
And that's in that scripture about hardness of heart, with the attitude that I just portrayed, is exactly like what Brad said. We're missing the entire point.
Right.
And that is forgiveness.
There we go. Thank you, Andrea.
Sorry, guys.
No, we appreciate that, and hey, listen, that's a wonderful discussion, and thank you for that, and even we should be passionate about what God wants, and that's beautiful. So we appreciate you very much, sister, and we love you. Okay, so let's close on that. As I mentioned, at least 2 class periods, and here's why. I knew we would have some things to come out, and that's okay. Let's finish this up next week. It's important we haven't finished the question. And any other questions like Scott has brought out, Andre has brought out, others have, please bring them. Let's cover all this in only one more, okay? But only one more class period, and we'll finish that up. Mary, was it Mary? Did you have a comment, Mary? No, but please, go ahead. We'll end on this. That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I overlooked you. Wasn't trying to.
The last 2 comments were similar to what I was going to say. We have a loving God, and if you repent or you convert, God forgives us. And that's his grace and mercy on us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he wants marriage to be symbolic of the relationship that we have with him. It doesn't matter what we do, mentally, spiritually, physically. He wants to forgive us and for us to stay together, and we have the same chance in our marriages too. Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoyed the discussion. I do believe, I hate to do this, but I feel like it's appropriate. We're going to change the topic for next week. We will finish this. I know it sounds wrong to do that. But I feel like it's very fitting, and it's strange by providence how it all came together. Christmas and Easter. When we're asked about Christmas and Easter, I want to cover that next week still. Let's do Romans 14:5 as a memory verse. Romans 14:5. Okay, thank you.